We are excited to have Deacon Harold with us for another round of Power Pack Talks. This time, last night, we were focused on restoring the family. This morning, we're going to, Deacon Harold's going to focus on restoring ourselves with a couple of powerful talks that you're sure to, I think, get a lot out of. Couple of reminders. We are practicing, COVID protocol, so please, again, keep your masks on and social distancing, keep that in place, especially, when you're socializing and so forth after or between talks. We'd appreciate that. We'll also, afterwards, ask you to leave and socialize outside as they need to sanitize the church. There's a wedding, I think, shortly afterwards in here, so we'll ask you to do that. Again, we will have these video recordings of all of his talks available on our websites by 1 o'clock today. So at stlawrence.org/Deacon Harold, stlawrence.org/Deacon Harold. On there, you can easily also access Deacon Harold's store with some of the items he was talking about. Those particular items will only be available, as he mentioned, he'll drop them in the parish office for you, but that'll only be for you folks that are here at the event, since he's going to be flying out shortly. Folks that are listening on the recording will have to get them shipped out, so just so everyone's aware of that. And then we will have them at the parish office. The hours are 8 to 4 during the week right here at the parish office if you do purchase items online. All right. Well, without further ado, let's welcome back Deacon Harold.
As I mentioned yesterday, I was born in Barbados, and my father was a very successful singer and songwriter. He also owned 2 very successful nightclubs. My mom, I mentioned, was a cardiac care nurse, and she did not care for my father's lifestyle. So she left Barbados with me and my little brother and my grandma, her mom. My father did not come with us. When he finally decided to join our family in the United States, a little over a year later, we wished that he hadn't. We quickly learned my father loved 3 things in life: womenizing, alcohol, and cigarettes. My father has 15 other children from other relationships besides the 4 with my mom that we know of. My cousin says there's probably more, but we can verify 15. My father also drank. And if you come from a household where alcohol is an issue, I don't even have to tell you about the hurtful and painful and embarrassing moments that come from living in a household like that, where you wish to God you lived at your friend's house instead of having to go home to your own house. My father was not a man of God. He was not baptized. He never went to church. The only time I ever heard him use the Lord's name was as a curse. Needless to say, they got divorced. And I maintained a respectful relationship with my father until I joined the Benedictines. When I was accepted into the monastery, I went to my father's apartment to tell him what I thought I was going to do for the rest of my life. And our conversation went something like this: "You're going to do what? You're the first person in our family ever to go to college. You get a scholarship to Notre Dame. You get an economics and business degree. And now you're going to waste your life living with a bunch of men? What's wrong with you? What am I supposed to tell my friends?" I told him what he could tell his friends. And then I didn't speak to him for 18 years. As far as I was concerned, on that day, he died. He was dead to me. So I joined the monastery. I told you what happened last night. And when I was ready to leave to go to Oregon, my mother said this to me. I was literally, I'm 20-something years old, late 20s, have all my stuff that I own in the back of my car. driving across country. My mom says this, before you leave this house, son, there's only one thing I want you to do. Yes, Mommy. I want you to pray for your father. It's the only time in my life I remember looking my mom in the face and telling her no. And she just smiled and said, I don't think you heard me, son. I said, the only thing I want you to do when you leave this house is to pray for your father. Okay, Mommy. So I prayed. When I do my prayers, I just threw my father's name in at the end, only because I promised my mother I would, for no other reason. Fast forward 17 of the 18 years, 17 years later, my first series on EWTN starts to air, Behold the Man, male spirituality. It starts to air internationally, including my home country of Barbados. One of my relatives sees me on TV and calls my father. Isn't that your son on TV? My son. So he flips the channel, bam, there I am. Hasn't seen me for 17 years. So he caught the last part of the episode, but he's intrigued. So he wants to watch the next week. So he got the time right, but the wrong day. So instead of watching me, he's watching some old nun with a Bible on her lap that laughs like, he's watching Mother Angelica. Now remember, my father was a musician. He did not know how this thing worked. He thought, who's that lady? Where's my son? So he thought she was the opening act. He thought this lady's going to talk for a while, then my son is going to come out. I never came out. But he watched the entire episode. Now remember, my father's not baptized, never been to church. Now, I didn't know that he watched, I didn't know any of this, by the way, because he never contacted me. Fast forward another year later, now it's year 18. I'm driving back from my job as police chief at the University of Portland. My phone rings. I don't recognize the number, but it has a New Jersey area code. I'm like, oh, probably one of my friends. Hello? Son? Pop? I almost crashed the car. I pulled over to the side of the road. I'm thinking to myself, what's going on? And he starts talking, and we talk for 31 minutes and 12 seconds. The longest conversation I can remember us ever having in our lives. And he talked to me most of that time about Jesus. And then we finished, and I remember clearly like it was yesterday. After I hung up, I looked at the phone, said 3112, and I remember yelling to myself in the car, who the hell does he think he is to call me after 18 years to tell me about Jesus? He doesn't know Jesus. I know Jesus. I'm the one on EWTN. All that man knows how to do is destroy our family. Then I said, Lord, if this is from you, you're going to have to show me, because I don't believe anything that comes out of that lying pig's mouth. And I learned that night, you got to trust God. You know? So now, a couple weeks later, I get my first invitation to speak in my home state of New Jersey at a parish 1 mile from my father's apartment. I took it as a sign. So I go, and whenever I go to Jersey back home, I stay with my brother. And I was at my brother's apartment. He made arrangements for me to see Pop. So I'm waiting. My father walks in, and I don't recognize him because he had lost a ton of weight because he had prostate cancer. So he was a big guy like me. He lost more than half of his body weight. He had big patches of hair missing because of chemo. And he walks in, and he goes, hello, son. It's good to see you. And I'm adjusting myself. I'm like, that looks like my father, that kind of thing. Then I got, acclimated. Then I wanted to hear what? I'm sorry, son. I'm sorry. For the hell I put you and your mother and your siblings through for all those years. I'm sorry. that I couldn't come to at least one of your wrestling matches. I'm sorry that I couldn't come to your graduation because I was drunk. I'm sorry that the one time you asked me to support you when you joined the monastery, I couldn't even do that for you. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. That's what I wanted to hear. But instead, my father starts talking about what his life is like now. And the Lord taught me a huge lesson that night. The Lord said, look, you know what happened back then, and he knows what happened back then. There's nothing either one of you can do to change that. Deal with the person I have in front of you now. My father says, hey, son, I'm still writing music. You want to hear a song? I'm like, oh, here we go. Here we go. Now, my father was a Calypsonian who sung soca music. So soca is kind of the Caribbean version of R&B. Now, typically his songs were about partying and women. Like, for example, he wrote a song called Hazel. Hazel, darling, woman, you excite me. I don't know where or how you got that body. That kind of stuff. And by the way, my mother's name was Eleanor, not Hazel. So I said, yeah, whatever, Pop. So he puts on a music track and he starts to sing. Here are some of the lyrics. Oh Lord, sweet Jesus, have mercy on me. My eyes were wide open, yet I failed to see. Dear Lord, I beg you, have mercy. Please, have mercy on me. I am so sorry. Lord, forgive me. I can't go on living this life without you. Dear Lord, I beg you, have mercy. Now, as he's singing, I'm saying to myself, you can't fake that. So I don't know what possessed me to do this, but when he finished singing, I literally walked up, standing like right in front of him, almost face to face. And I said to him, I'm going to ask you a question right now. If you've ever loved me even once as your son, don't lie to me. If you're going to lie, then say nothing. What happened to you? All this talk about Jesus and mercy. Had I not been standing in that man's face to hear what came out of his mouth next, I would never have believed it. This unbaptized, non-church-going pagan who literally tore our family apart, looked me in the face with all seriousness and said, the Blessed Mother and Divine Mercy. And I was stunned. I literally could not speak or form words in my mouth when he said that. Now, fast forward, I go home. My mom says, is it true, son? Is it true? I said, Mommy, you can't fake what I saw. Now, I started talking with my dad about every month or so. Then he calls me the following spring. He says, son, I want to come see my grandchildren. I said, okay, Pop, when can you come? I could come this weekend in June, this coming June. I said, well, Pop, it's not really a good weekend for me. I go, so that's the only weekend I could come, so I'm coming. Here's the problem. I was so angry with my father that when the kids were born and they started going to school and it was grandparents' day at school, and they asked me, where's our grandfather? I told them he was dead. That's how much I hated that man. I don't exaggerate when I say I hated him. So now I got a problem. He wants to come see them. And I told him he was dead. So what did I do? I did what any intelligent man would do in my situation. I went to my wife and said, how I get out of this? And without missing a beat, my wife says, well, Jesus did raise the dead, didn't he? I said, aha. I said, kids, gather around, a miracle. So my father comes, fast forward, my father shows up, meets my wife and kids for the first time, and a lot of amazing things happened that weekend. I'll just share two very quickly. One, there was a men's conference that weekend. I wasn't speaking. I just wanted to go to support the guys. So I said, Pop, I'm supposed to go to this men's conference. You want to come? Sure, son, let's go. Never been to anything Catholic in his life. So we go to this men's conference. Who's the main speaker? In God's providence, Father Donald Calloway. And some of you are nodding because you know what's coming, right? Father Calloway starts telling his, anybody know who, you know Father Donald Calloway is? Okay. Father Calloway starts telling his story. I'm sitting across a table, a round table from my dad. Father Calloway starts telling his conversion story. When he gets to the part, I was in the Yakuza gang and I was drug running and money laundering and sex and all this kind of stuff. My father leans over and he says, that guy's a priest? I'm like, yeah, Pop. And Father Calloway told me how he got thrown, he got put on a plane by Japanese military police, told never to come back to this country again. He said, he's worse than me. I said, I'm gonna tell you, Pop, right? And then Father Calloway gets to the part of his story where everything changed for him. Who do you have an encounter with? Mary. So as soon as he talked about Mary, my father reaches across and grabs my arm, and he shakes my arm. Mary, son. Mary. I said, I know, Pop. He goes, I have to meet him. Okay, Pop. So Father Calloway and I are friends. In fact, we text each other or talk every single week, including this week. We talk all the time. So I introduced him to my dad. And instead of signing books, long line of people waiting to meet him, he's talking to my dad about Mary. I'm like, what's going on right now? So then after the conference, we're heading home. My father wants to take the family out to dinner. Remember, my mom was living with us, but a week before my father arrived, she had a bout of congestive heart failure. So she was in a convalescent facility because she required more care than we could give her at home. So I said, oh, shoot, Pop, I need to go see Mommy. Let me drop you home. I'll go see Mommy, then we can go to dinner. He goes, no, let's go see your mother. Okay. So we're like driving almost by the place. So I don't have time to warn my mom. So we get to the place, we get out, I said, Pop, let me go in first. I go in, I walk around, I sit down on my mom's bed, I give her a kiss, I said, Mommy. She looks over at the door and in walks my father. And the look on my mother's face is burned into my memory. It was like happy, anger, frustrated, joy. I mean, her eyes got, anybody, you old enough to remember Marty Feldman? Remember his eyes like, my mom's eyes look like that. I get up from the bed, my father walks over and sits down where I was sitting. He had big hands. And he put his hands over my mother's hands. Hello, Eleanor. And they start talking, and I leave the room. So I'm at the nurse's station thinking, this ain't gonna take long, right? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, they're still in there. Now I'm a little concerned because it's the first time I can remember my parents being in the same room without yelling or something being thrown. Half an hour later, my father comes out. Let's go, son. Okay, so I walk in to kiss my mom goodbye. She goes, who was that? I know, I'm getting used to this too. To this day, I have no idea what they talked about. No clue. Here's what I do know. A couple months after my father left, my mom brings me into her room when I get home from work. She goes, son, I want to talk to you. Sit down. Remember when you left to come out here? What I asked you to do? Yeah, you asked me to pray for Pop, and I told you no. She says, starting on that day, I prayed a rosary every day with the sole intention of reconciling with your father before I die. And that's what happened when he came and visited me in the room. I said, wait, Mommy, stop. Tell me, stop. What are you saying to me right now? You're telling me that when I left to drive out, that was over 20 years ago. You're telling me that you started praying a rosary every day for Pop? Yes. Mommy, what happened after year 8? After year 15? Year 20? Every day? Yes. And you never stopped? No. And the Lord answered prayer. A month later, my mom was dead. Only thing. In fact, she never took her wedding ring off. She died with it on. She never took it off in all those years. Because she believed. Now, they didn't live together again or anything like that, but whatever they talked about, my mom was at peace that they were reconciled. Now, before I go on with the rest of the story about my dad, I want to say that there's probably true to say that most of us in this church right now have been hurt deeply by someone that we loved or someone that we trusted. And as you sit here right now, you're still feeling the anger, the sadness, the pain, the frustration, the guilt from whatever happened to you. You are struggling to find peace. And why aren't you getting the peace that you so want and desire? See, Jesus says, my peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives, do I give it to you. So we have to stop thinking about finding the peace in worldly ways of thinking. We have to put on, as Paul says, the mind of Christ. So yes, some of you may have been beaten by your ex-husband who hit you because he was drunk, or maybe just because he felt like it. Maybe one of you cheated on your spouse. That includes looking at pornography, by the way. Your spouse finds out about it. You go to counseling and you're healed now. But in the back of your mind, you're asking yourself, can I really trust him again? Maybe some of you right now are struggling not to take that next drink. Maybe you were raped when you were in college. Maybe you were molested when you were a child or an adolescent. Maybe you were bullied because you were the fat kid or the poor kid or the Hispanic kid or the kid with glasses or the kid with braces. Maybe you were the bullier because you were getting your butt kicked at home by your father, and so you think the only way you could deal with it is to take it out on a kid who can't defend himself in school. Maybe you thought about killing yourself. Maybe you even tried because you can't take the pain. Maybe some of you are struggling because your kids are away from the church and your heart is broken. Maybe some of you are angry all the time. You know the anger I'm talking about, where you want to punch your wife in the face, and you stop yourself and say, whoa, where did that come from? Maybe you struggle with depression. Maybe you're physically in pain every day. You wake up in pain. You spend most of your day in pain. You go to bed in pain just to wake up and do it all again the next day. How do you find the peace in the midst of the suffering? I'm going to give you 4 ways to do exactly that. And I've walked, now this is my own thing, this is the path that I walk myself to find healing with my Father. And I'm going to tell you right now, what I'm going to tell you right now is not easy. You know why? Because that's not easy. Every step Christ took to redeem us in his merciful love was a step toward death. But it's through that death that we're able to have life. Because there is no Easter Sunday without Good Friday. There is no resurrection without crucifixion. And what did we say about Psalm 90 yesterday? Most of these years are emptiness and pain. Most of life is the cross. So how do we deal with this? Number one, do not bury in the past what happened to you. We have a defense mechanism that kicks in sometimes. If I just forget what happened, if I stop remembering what happened to me, then I don't have to face that reality. Don't do that ever. Let me give you a real world example of why you should not do that. When I was still active in a parish, I had left the parish on my way home. The secretary calls me. Hey, this guy just called you. He sounds really, really upset. He said he needs to talk to you. I said, well, is this a guy parishioner? No. But he says he has to talk to you. Okay. So I tell him to come and I'll meet him there. So I flip the car around. I go back to Immaculate Heart. I'm sitting in the parlor. This guy comes in, never seen him before in my life. He's crying. He's upset. Clearly, he's disheveled. He says, she's going to change the locks. She's going to kick me out. She's going to take the kids away from me. I don't understand what's... I said, okay, stop. Sit down. Tell me what's going on. So he tells me. He and his wife have been married for 10 years. They have 2 children, a son and a daughter. His wife is a very successful attorney. He is a stay-at-home dad because his wife makes enough money so he doesn't have to work, so they decide to stay home with the kids. And he says he has the routine that they came up with. You know, he makes dinner, and as dinner is sitting on the stove, warming up, waiting for mom to come home, he gets the play mat out, plays with the kids. Mom comes home, she joins in. They reconnect as a family, then they have dinner, go through their normal routine. Except for tonight. Mom comes home just like normal, and he's holding the daughter, playing the kids, and his wife says, why are you touching her like that? And he says, what are you talking about? Don't do that to her. Get out. Honey, what I don't understand. Get out. And throws him out of the house. And she's in a rage. So now I'm still a cop back then, right? So as he's talking, I'm thinking. And when he finishes, I say this. Was your wife ever molested as a child? And he said, Deacon, why would you say that? We've been married for 10 years. We knew each other for several years before that. We have a normal sex life. This has never been an issue. It's never come up. I said, let me tell you what I think is going on. I think everything was fine when you had your son. Everything was fine when you had your daughter until your daughter got to the age where she was first molested. And for whatever reason tonight, your wife comes home and the way you were holding your daughter triggered a memory about something that happened to her. And now she's transferring that memory onto you. And he's just like shocked, like, what are you talking about? I said, hold on. You got her parents' number in your phone? Yes. Dial it right now and put it on speakerphone. And he did. The father answers the phone. Dad? So he explains to his father what's going on. He goes, I'm here with Deacon Harold. I'm not going to tell you her name, obviously. But he goes, has she ever been molested? Dead silence on the other end of the line. In fact, it was so quiet that he thought his father-in-law hung up. Hello? Dad? Hello? Then finally, yes, she was molested by the brother of a babysitter. When we found out about it, we got it stopped. And we never talked about it again. Why? It became the family secret. And now this secret, which they tried to bury and suppress, has now come back and bit this guy hard. Because what do you think happened next? She takes him to court. And what do you think happened? Now, I went on his behalf to be a character witness for him. His wife gets up there and says, who's a respected attorney, remember, Your Honor, I came home on this day and this time, and here's what I saw. Her word against a stay-at-home dad. Oh, yeah. Not only did he lose all his parental rights and got a restraining order filed against him, he also got charged criminally and put on the sex offender registry. His life is ruined. Last I heard, he left. He's not from Portland. He left Portland, and last I heard, he was living with his parents. If something happened to you, and every time you think about it, there's pain, there's anger, there's frustration, feel it! Feel it! If you have to cry, then cry. If you have to scream, then scream. Don't suppress it or bury it, because it will come back to bite you. You will never find the peace. Bring it to the surface so that God can heal it. God is saying, I love you more than you will ever know. And he wants to give you his peace. But remember, we said yesterday, God doesn't force his love on us. We have to be open to receiving what God wants to give us. If we have the anger and the pain and the resentment, that blocks us from receiving God's mercy. If we bring it up and allow God to heal it, washed in the blood of the Lamb, then that opens our hearts to receive everything God wants to give us. But the first step, that first step to Calvary, admit and acknowledge what happened to you or what you did. Maybe you drove your girlfriend to the abortion clinic. You participated in that abortion. Don't hide it anymore. That's number one. Number two, fight with spiritual weapons. Now, you remember the story of David and Goliath. The armies of Israel were afraid of Goliath. Why? Look at the description of this guy. If you're following along your Bibles, 1 Samuel chapter 17, starting at verse 3. 1 Samuel 17, verse 3. And the Philistines stood on one side of the mountain and Israel on the other side of the mountain, with a valley between them. And there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath the Goth, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. So a cubit is 18 inches. A cubit is 18. A span is half a cubit or 9 inches. So if you do the math, the dude's 9 feet, 9 inches tall. Big dude. He had a helmet of bronze on his head. He was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. So mail, if you ever watch those King Arthur movies, you know, after they take off that outer armor, there's like a silvery, meshy kind of armor. It looks like fish scales kind of thing. That's called mail. His coat of mail weighed 5,000 shekels. A shekel is 0.4 ounces. Do the math, 125 pounds. So a 9 feet, 9 inch dude with 125 pounds of armor come walking up on you, you're going to be scared, like the armies of Israel. But you have to ask yourself, my friends, what is the Goliath in your life? What is the Goliath that has, as you sit here, you are so scared that you cannot face that Goliath in your life? And so instead, you just sit back and tremble before him in fear. What is your Goliath? The abuse, the rape, the drugs, the alcohol, the porn? What is it? What is it that's holding you back from having the relationship with God that you've always wanted? What's holding you back from having the marriage that you always wanted? What's holding you back from having a relationship with your children that you always wanted? See, here's the thing. Sometimes when we're afraid to face our Goliath, we get stuck where we are. And sometimes when we get stuck, we get comfortable. And in order to take our relationship with God, with our spouses, with our children to that next level, we got to get uncomfortable. Then David shows up on the scene. And by the way, what day did David show up on? Day 40. So Goliath issued the challenge twice a day for 40 days. David shows up on day 40. Now that number shows up a lot in the Bible, doesn't it? 40 days and 40 nights in the ark, wandering for 40 years in the desert, which was actually 38 years, but they rounded up to 40. Moses going up to get the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai, 40 days and 40 nights. Jesus, before he started his public ministry, 40 days in the desert. How long is Lent? Why is that number so important? For the Jewish people, 40 was the number of gestational weeks in a pregnancy. 40 represented a time of trial, of testing, and of waiting. And if you are pregnant, you know it's trial, testing, and waiting. Because after 40 days, weeks, years, God is gonna do something. David shows up on day 40. He hears the challenge of Goliath. Are we gonna sit here while this uncircumcised Philistine mocks the armies of God? Who's gonna do something? Not me, not me, not me, not me. David says, I got this. So he goes to Saul. Saul, I want to fight Goliath. Are you out of your mind? God's going to kill you. David said, I got this. So David makes his only mistake. He puts on Saul's armor. And when he puts on the armor of Saul, let me describe it. Tell me who he sounds like. He put a helmet of bronze on his head. He clothed himself with a coat of mail. He girded his sword over his armor. Who does David sound like to you? Goliath. And what does David do? He takes off. He goes, I cannot go out with these. Why? David understood you cannot defeat the Goliath in your life with the weapons of man. So David takes himself off. He grabs his staff in one hand. Then he goes to the brook and he takes 5 smooth stones and a sling and puts them in his shepherd's bag or wallet. So he reaches to his shepherd's bag or wallet and pulls out a sling and 5 smooth stones. A sling and 5 smooth stones. Now, if you understand biblical typology, I would say that David fought Goliath with a type of rosary. The sling and the 5 stones are the 5 wounds of Christ, each of the 5 wounds of Christ, or each of the 5 joyful, sorrowful, luminous, and glorious mysteries of the rosary. David understood you can only defeat the Goliath in your life with the weapons of God. And my friends, as Catholics, we have an arsenal. We have rosaries. We have novenas. This is the year of St. Joseph. We have devotional. We have all kinds of things that we're equipped with to fight against the Goliath in our life. Yes, go see the psychologist. Yes, go to your AA meeting. But you will not defeat the Goliath just with the weapons of man. You have to fight with the weapons of God. Pick one and fight. Now, when you finally have the courage to face with your Goliath, armed with your spiritual weapon, Goliath is going to try to turn on you. Remember what he said to David. David goes to Goliath. He comes with his sling and 5 smooth stones. What does Goliath say? Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? So this is what's going on. When you turn, your Goliath is going to say to you, wait, let me see if I got this right. You think that you can beat me with your rosaries? And with your chapter of the Divine Mercy? And your Eucharistic adoration? I'm Goliath! I'm your rapist. I'm your molester. I'm Pornhub. I'm alcohol. I'm the bully. You can't beat me! That's what Goliath is going to try to say to you. And how do you respond? Ooh, David, I love this kid. Love this kid. What does David say in response? You come to me with sword and spear and javelin. I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts. In Hebrew, Yahweh Sabaoth. The God of the armies. That's literally what it means in Hebrew. Yahweh Sabaoth means the God of armies. The God of the armies of Israel whom you have defied. So in other words, David says to Goliath, I come to you in the name of the Lord. What do we say at every holy sacrifice of the Mass? Blessed is he who? We say the same thing at every Mass that David says to Goliath. Goliath can't beat us. David understood that God fights with and for him. There's no way he could lose. And once we understand with all of our heart and all of our mind and soul and strength that God fights with and for us, there is no way our Goliath can defeat us. That's number 2. Number 3, general confession. What do I mean by that? General confession is when you go to confession and you've confessed all the sins you committed in your entire life. Now, some of you are saying, why would you do that? Because I've already gone and confessed the sin. And you're correct. The sin is forgiven. The slate is wiped clean. So why would you go back and tell Father, and I know I'm going to be giving a lot of work to the priest here, right? But why would you go back and confess all the sins you committed in your life? Let me ask you this. Even though you walk out of confession, the sin is forgiven, who's the person that's the hardest to forgive? Yourself. So you may walk out of confession, the sin's gone, but you still have a hard time forgiving yourself. Some of you go to confession all the time. You still can't forgive yourself for the abortion. How could God ever forgive me for taking the life of my own child? Yes, I was under the spell of Planned Parenthood, but now, as a Catholic, I know better. I know I'm sorry for what happened, and you can't forgive yourself. So what happens is this. You go into that confession, you confess all the sins you committed, and in that moment you realize, wait a minute, I don't do that sin anymore. Or, wait a minute, I don't do that sin nearly as much anymore. And you realize you're closer to Christ than when you started. Think about it like this with the prodigal son. I love that parable. My favorite part, when the prodigal son turns back to the father, you got to understand the power of that story. Let me footnote. See how much time I have left here. Okay, footnote. Why did Jesus talk about the guy in the pig pen? Because if you look at the dietary laws in the book of Leviticus for the Jewish people, obviously they couldn't eat pork or anything like that, right? Disgusting animals. But here's how Jesus takes it to a whole nother level. Jesus doesn't say when he was in the pig pen, he longed to eat the pig. That would have been filthy, disgusting enough. What did Jesus say? He takes it to a whole nother level of disgustingness. He longed to eat what the pigs ate. I'm sure when Jesus says that, somebody vomited. It doesn't say it in the scriptures, but if he would have said eat the pig, they went, oh, eat the pig. Oh, that's disgusting. He said eat what the pig. What do pigs eat? Garbage. That's how, what's Jesus? You can't get any lower than this guy was. When he finally had the courage to go back, when the father was still a long way off, the father caught sight of him, which means what? The father was looking for him the entire time. And here we are. And God is looking, the Father is looking for us the entire time. When we feel that God is not there, when we feel he's abandoned us, he's always there looking for us. And when the son had the courage to turn back, did the father say, oh yeah, I'm right here. I'm going to wait for you to come to reach me. No. The Father sees the Son. What happens? He runs to meet his Son. And God wants to run to meet you with his love and his mercy. And by going to that confession, confessing all the sins you committed in your life, in that moment of catharsis, you realize, oh my goodness, I'm closer to the Father than when I really believed. And the Father will rush to meet you even more with his grace and his mercy. Finally, I'll tell the last part within the context of my father. So fast forward a few years later. I'm on a speaking tour in Italy. My brother calls me and says, hey, you got to come home. Pop's cancer is back. There's a mass in his cecum. And he didn't pass the heart test for the surgery. So they're just going to hit it with the chemo, whatever. And they said he's not going to make it to Christmas. You need to come home now. So I said, okay. So I changed my flight, come home, spent 3 days with my brother because now my father was living with my brother. On the second day I was there, the Holy Spirit called me to kneel down in front of my father. He was sitting on the couch. I knelt down at his feet, and I asked him to forgive me for hating him for 18 years. I asked him to forgive me for telling my children he was dead. Now, some of you are saying, why did you do that? You didn't do anything. That's not the point. God is, in that beautiful divine mercy image, the rays are coming forth from the heart of Jesus. They're not coming back. They're going out. The Holy Spirit was calling me to be a vehicle of mercy to my Father. Now, hear me now. I did not ask for forgiveness of what he did to our family, what he did to me. I asked him to forgive me for how I responded to that, for the hatred I had in my heart. That's what I'm asking for forgiveness for. And with tears in his eyes, he said, I do forgive you, son. And I don't have time to get into the rest of the story, but it was a miracle intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary. On the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe, my father's cancer was gone. He lived for another 4 years. During those 4 years, he would say things to me. God is real, son. God is real. Yes, Pop. I wish I knew back then what I know now. Me too, Pop. Why am I asking you to do these 4 things? To go to the person who hurt you and ask them to forgive you for how you responded to them. Why? That's a hard, all 4 of those steps are hard. That last one is the hardest. Why? Think about it like this. Imagine you walk into your kitchen and you see your 3-year-old grandchild holding a knife, a big, large, sharp knife by the blade in her little hand. And you see that. Oh my goodness, would you want to run and take the knife out of her hand? Would you do that? No. Why? You cut her hand off. What would you do instead? You walk in the kitchen, you see that, you go, oh my goodness, honey, come here. Come see Grandpa. Come see your grandpa. Look at that. Wow. Let me see that. And your little granddaughter walks over, shows you the knife. Wow, look at that. Oh, honey, can you give that to me? Oh, sweetie, can you give that to Grandpa? And she looks at you, she just opens her hand, and you slowly, oh, thank you, sweetheart. Grandpa loves you. You take that knife out of her hand. Right now, God, the Father, is saying to you, what is that in your hand? The anger, the hatred, the pain, the sadness, the resentment, the memories. Come here. Open your hand. Can you open your hand? I love you. Can you open your hand? And your Father wants you to open your hand so he can remove that knife from your life forever. Not tomorrow, now! Now! Trust him. Let me tell you what happens when you do that. Just very, I know all over time, just very quickly. My father did come to faith eventually and was baptized. The day before my father died, I was in the airport on my way to Denver. We're 10 minutes from boarding the plane. My brother calls, says, hey, Pop is in the hospital. He ain't going to make it this time. You need to come home now. You may not even make it home in time. So I got my flight switch, got to Newark, arrived 11:30 at night. My brother picked me up, went to the hospital. There's my pop in the ICU. The machines are doing 80% of the breathing for him. He's on all these stuff. He's unconscious, breathing tube. My siblings are there, my two brothers and my sister. And so I said, look, you guys go get some sleep. I'm still on Pacific time. I'll do a prayer vigil for Pop. I'll do an all-night prayer vigil. So I was doing the precious blood novena. Oh, that's awesome, by the way. If you don't know about the most precious blood, oh, so as several times I'm praying, my father kind of wakes up, and he tries to pull the tube out of his mouth, like grab his hands. It's okay, Pop, I'm here. It's okay, Pop. And he goes back to sleep. Now, before I got on the plane, I said to my brother, call a priest to anoint Pop. Now, my brother doesn't go to church. That's another long story. But he goes, what priest? I said, just call a priest. Get someone to anoint Pop. So I did the prayer vigil. I go get some sleep. I come back. The doctors say, there's nothing else they can do. You're okay to, and I called the priest, who was a friend of mine, who's a medical ethicist. He said, you're good to go. So the nurses started pulling all the IVs and stuff out. And I said, oh, Jerry, did you get a priest? He said, yes. I said, oh, thank you. I said, who'd you get? He called the monastery and got one of the monks to anoint my father. You see how God brought that all back around again? So at 12:55, they pull out the last IV. 1 o'clock, did my first chaplet. 2 o'clock, my second chaplet. Hand to God. 3 o'clock, as I started my last chaplet, my father died. My sister screams. My other brother, Andrew, was out in the hallway. He runs into the room. Pop's dead. And I'm standing in the corner with my rosary in my hand saying, he made it till 3. He made it till 3. My brother said, what are you talking about? I said, that's the hour of mercy. Pop died at the same hour as Jesus. And by the way, it was October 5th, 2016. So I didn't realize what day that was at the time. So, if you've ever been in a room when someone dies, they kick you out, the doctor comes in, all stuff. So we're crying out in the hallway, and I said to my siblings, I hope that Mommy and Pop can find the peace in heaven that they couldn't find together on earth. And as we're going to the funeral home, I remembered, I prayed all those prayers, but I didn't pray the office. So I get my breviary out, it's October 5th. Whose feast day is that? St. Faustina. So now I start laughing. My father dies at exactly 3 o'clock, the hour of mercy, on the feast day of the Divine Mercy Saint. And I knew that my father's going to make it to heaven. He's going to be in purgatory for a long time, but he's going to make it. He's going to make it. So what's the lesson? I thought that my father was dead, and I forgot that Jesus raises the dead, and I will never make that mistake again. God wants to bring true, deep, lasting healing to every single one of us, because his love and his mercy is too great. And he wants to give it, he wants to fill us to overflowing, but we have to allow his mercy to come into our hearts. Mercy is going beyond and above justice out of love for the person. Mercy is how we respond to evil and human suffering out of love. O my strength, it is you to whom I turn. For you, O God, are my stronghold. the God who shows me love. Amen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deacon Harold, for that powerful story. We're going to go ahead and take a brief break, and we will pick up in about 10 minutes.